My name is Fernando Galaviz, and I'm the chairman of the National Federal Contractors Association, and I'm also the chairman of the Centec Group, a small business federal contracting firm that has been doing business for 25 years. We have performed on over 4,500 contracts with an aggregate value of over $1 billion. All those accomplishments have been by the results of the excellent performance of our team members, our employees that have supported the federal government on all the contracts that we have had the privilege and honored to have been given and won. The workforce that we have and that every single federal contractor has indeed supports the mission of the federal government and supports the interests of our taxpayers. In the changing landscape of our society, in which it requires for two parents to work to support their families, and as those families evolve and children get ill or their parents get ill, indeed for that hourly employee, it becomes a significant challenge on how to handle these many personal needs of their family. The proposal to have the ability for an employee to put that extra effort to support the government, their employer, and be able to bank those hours to take care also of the needs of their family, this is a very important need in order to support those families, to motivate the employees, to retain them. And therefore, we appreciate very much the support of these national leaders here with other organizations that indeed want to meet the need of that hourly employee. So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate this opportunity and privilege to collaborate with all of you on this legislation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Fernando, we want to thank you and Centec for hosting us today. And I want to salute Chairman Klein, and of course the bill sponsor Martha Roby, for all the hard work on the Working Families Flexibility Act, which is what this bill is called, and it's called that for a reason. Fernando talked about being able to meet the needs of the workforce of today, and that's exactly what this bill does. Straight up, it says that hourly wage employees in the private sector ought to have the same privilege and benefit as those in the public sector. And that is, if they work over 40 hours a week, they ought to be able to engage in a voluntary arrangement with their employer to have comp time instead of receiving time and a half overtime. It's very simple. If you're a working parent, as I am, you know one thing all of us have in common, and that is we need more time. That's what this bill will allow. It is a common sense bill. It puts parents before politics. And with that, I'd like to introduce the chairwoman of our Republican conference, Cathy McMorris Rodgers.
Hi, I'm Cathy McMorris Rodgers. I'm a working mom and the congresswoman from the 5th District in Washington State. 2 kids, 6-year-old Cole and 2-year-old Grace, and every day trying to balance the demands of my job with those obligations that I have as a mom and a wife. And I am thankful for the flexibility that this job offers me to be able to go to a parent-teacher conference or take the kids to the doctor. And that is the flexibility that any working parent would want in this country. And you know, my experience is like a lot of women in this country. 75% of women aged 25 to 55 are working. 60% of those who have children under 6 are in the workforce. So the times have changed, and the number of women in the workforce has changed, yet so many of our federal laws and regulations have not kept pace. They were written at a different time. Many in the 1930s, when the family structure looked a lot different, and a lot of our laws were written for a one-income household. Now, women, when they seek work, they often seek work that's going to fit into their lifestyle choices. They may choose fewer hours on the job so that they'll have more time at home. And this comes into play when you consider workplace flexibility. Many of these labor laws were written years ago that require a full-time hourly worker to be paid time and a half if they want to work longer than 40 hours a week. And for the most part, those who want to take occasional time away from their job must either take annual leave or leave with no pay. These rules are particularly bizarre given the world in which we live today, where people no longer have to be chained to a desk 8 hours a day. Especially in light of cellular phones, internet connections, mobile offices, and part-time consulting work. We need to update these laws. I'm proud to be a sponsor of the Working Families Flexibility Act.
Thank you. I'm John Klein from Minnesota, the chairman of the Education and Workforce Committee. I'm very proud to be here with my colleagues and these working Americans behind me. And again, thank you, Fernando, for hosting us here. The case has been made, but I want to underscore it. We're dealing with a law, the Fair Labor Standards Act, that was written in the Great Depression. This is a 1938 law. The workplace and the workforce was very different then. Today, there are 8.5 million single parents in the workforce, and over half of the workforce comes from families where both parents are working. Time has become more valuable than money in many cases. We've heard from working women here. Let me underscore that this applies to working men as well. There are single dads out there and dads where both parents are working, and they want to spend the time with their kids and going to parent-teacher conferences and going to baseball games and doing those things. Time is so important, and this bill addresses that need. It is very common sense. We need to bring that 1938 law up to the 21st century, and I'm very proud of the folks here with me and the author of the bill, who I think is next, the gentle lady from Alabama, Martha Roby, author of the bill.
Thank you to my chairman and to the leader and Fernando, all of the working families that are represented up here today. We just heard really compelling stories from each of these individuals about either their workplace or their business that they own, and how this bill, this amendment to the Fair Labor Standards Act, would provide working families with a choice. This is your time. You get to choose how to use it. And our message to all working Americans is very clear. We want to get Washington out of the business of telling Americans how to use their time. And so this amendment, as has already been explained, is very, very simple. This is something the public sector, federal employees, municipalities, counties, state governments have been using since 1985. And if it's good enough for the public sector, it should be good enough for everybody standing up here today. And so, again, thank you for hosting us, and to all the moms that are represented here. You know, I have two children, Margaret and George. Margaret's 8, George is 4, and I certainly can relate as well to the pulls on the hardworking American family. And so it's my privilege to be the sponsor on this bill, and I want to introduce Renee Elmers from North Carolina, my colleague.
Thank you, Martha, and thank you to everyone. This is a very, very important piece of legislation that I am very excited to be a co-sponsor of. And I will say, as chairman of the Republican Women's Policy Committee, this is exactly the type of legislation that we need to be supporting for our moms and our dads to help our families. That's what we need to be doing here in Washington, and make the labor laws a better approach for families. You know, as we were sitting in the roundtable discussion, I was taking note of all the important information that was being exchanged. One, for the families, for the employees, this empowers them to be able to make choices and decreases the stress that all of our families are having to undertake these days as we pull ourselves in so many different directions. But also as employers, this also is able to provide a better workplace. You know, all employers are trying to make it better for their employees, to make sure that the morale is there so that employees can be focused on their job. You know, we shouldn't have to be faced with the decision of taking our child to the pediatrician or spending that special time with them in lieu of a conference call or a business decision that we have to make. We should be able to make those decisions, and I'm very, very proud, again, to stand here with my colleagues and these folks here who are representing the workforce and tell you what an important piece of legislation this is. Thank you.
Well, some of you were upstairs, and I believe all of you were, and heard some of the discussion with the folks who are here in the workplace, and would just open it up to questions if you have for them or for any of us. Molly?
Mr. Leader, have you talked to Leader Reed about this? And I'm going to pledge in ignorance here. What has been the holdup? I don't understand why the Senate hasn't taken this up, or why the President put out this veto threat. I mean, how does that affect this?
Well, again, I think I am in conversations with individuals in the Senate to hopefully see a Senate co-sponsor come forward to join Martha Roby in sponsoring this type of legislation. As you suggest, it really is a head scratcher to even think, why would anybody oppose such legislation? Yes.
I don't know what the idea is, but this softer, friendlier Republican Party concept that has been circulating that I don't know if it actually has a name. This is part of that, yes? And is this, and how is it different from the 1997?
You know what I would say? I would ask each and every one of these working individuals, working Americans, whether they even care about remaking a political party. What they care about is making sure that their life works, that they're given, and you heard upstairs, that they're given the choice on how to use what they've earned. And that's all we're saying here, is get the government out of the way and allow working moms and dads the ability to use what they've earned to better their families so their life can work at home. Because as we know, as Fernando told us, you know, the success of his business and those that he works with depends upon the will of the individuals that work at these businesses every single day, just like the folks that are here.
When we look at the statement that came out from OMB this morning, in some of the unions like the AFL-CIO kind of opposition, there seems to be an air of mistrust amongst all sides. When you all seem to be talking about some of the same issues, like Congressman Miller, Senator Harkin, they'd like to see the minimum wage raised. If you are all focusing on these kinds of job issues, are there areas in inroads where you could work together? Maybe they could work with you on this, you could work with them on this?
Well, certainly I think what we're trying to do is demonstrate that, you know, people can have disagreements all day long. No two human beings agree on everything. I've been married, I always say this, 23 and a half years. I assure you, my wife and I don't agree on everything. But we've found a way to make our life work and raise our kids because there's more in common than we have in difference. And I think that in general, human beings can actually find that route if we work hard to do it. Certainly this is an issue where if you listen to these working Americans and parents, certainly we would want to give them the choice. One of the employers here today, Kim, I think, talked about what works in her small business. And I think, Kim, if I could paraphrase you, what works is when you give employees, working people, a choice, the morale shoots off the charts because you're actually empowering them. That's all this bill does. And it's voluntary, which is why any of the objections that may be lodged from opponents, I think, don't hold any water, because this is all a voluntary agreement by the employer-employee. The employer can choose when that, can make sure that when that employee takes the time off, it is consistent with the expectations of the job. That's all. It's strictly voluntary.
Forgive me, are you saying you would be able and willing to work with them on these kinds of job issues?
Well, I'm not speaking to the minimum wage issue because right now we're trying to provide it more jobs for everyone. And I think it's pretty well known that if you increase the mandate on employers, you're going to see less jobs. We want more jobs.
You unveiled this Making Life Work at the start of the year. It's sort of been overshadowed by a lot of fiscal issues, some of
Well, listen, we have never said that we're not going to keep pursuing our desire to correct the fiscal imbalance at the federal level. And we've been through and will continue discussions about how to resolve the spending problem in Washington, how to get our economy growing again. This bill is a bill that strikes right to the heart of the economic engine of America, and that's the working people of our country. They need to make sure that their life works at home so that they can be more productive, so they can create more value, so businesses can create more jobs, so small business entrepreneurs can see more success, because that way we'll see more jobs.
The critics, labor has come out against this and said it's kind of a Trojan horse. Companies pay less, so kind of force comp time as opposed to overtime. One, and I know you talked about this a second ago, but what's your response to that? And the bill seems like it would be a win for everyone. Has there been outreach to labor to the other side, and kind of what is your response?
Sure. Well, I would just respond to the notion of cost. No one escapes cost here. I think that those who are alleging that type of criticism don't understand the accounting rules in the private sector. There have to be the liability associated with comp time has to be booked in a small business's liabilities ledger, just as you would if you had to make payroll. Same thing. There's no escaping any cost here. This is all good. This is all trying to give folks more choice in how they can address their time. And I think if the chairman wants to speak to the issue of working with the labor unions, I know he and his committee spent a lot of time trying to create a better environment for everybody to have more productivity, have more hours, and produce more, and so we can see our economy grow again.
Since you called me out by name, Leader, it is interesting that in the public sector, unions put this in their bargaining agreements so that they have comp time. So there's not a fundamental complaint about comp time. This is an old, stale argument that we're hearing from the AFL-CIO, spoke to this, that says somehow employers are going to take advantage of their employees, and it assumes that these working people here can't make a decision on their own about whether or not they want the time or the money, and that's what this comes down to. It is an old, stale argument. I think that everybody in this room, I guess I can't speak for all of you, Molly, but everybody in this room, as a matter of fact, there is a journalism exception in the private sector where journalists can get comp time, but it's pretty narrow to have that. This is about more flexibility for working families, more choice for employees, the ability for employers and employees to work together for the better of both. It is really straightforward. The arguments against it, I'm afraid, are pretty stale.
So how did they win in the 1980s, or how did they change the law for public sector in the 1980s? Right, Congressman.
That preceded my arrival, but it's a 1985 law. It was an amendment to the Fair Labor Standards Act that allowed the public sector to do this.
Mike, do you want to say something from SHRM's?
I wanted to thank everybody on behalf of the Society for Human Resource Management and our 260,000 members who are strongly in support of allowing private sector employees to have the same choice as their public sector employees currently do. In particular, the leadership of Mr. Cantor, the Chairman Klein, Congressman Roby, Congresswoman Elmers, and Congresswoman McMorris Rodgers. We really appreciate all of their work and leadership in trying to put forward this real common sense approach to try and meet the needs of employees in this 21st century. And in particular, our colleagues around here working